You are not watching this story. You are in it. At the end of each video, two choices will appear. Your decision determines what happens next. There is no going back. Elena refused preservation, refused interface, refused the hollow existence that the root offered as alternative to incorporation. She would not become mask, would not become surface, would not become the appearance of life without its substance, the form of function without its meaning. She had the knife, the blade that did not reflect light, that absorbed it, that had been forged or grown or manifested for purposes that the journal did not specify, that the bloodline had passed down without explanation, that existed as tool and symbol and final resort when all other choices failed. She struck, not at the root's surface, at the depression where her hand had fit, where the incorporation offer had been made, where the root's awareness had pressed against her and found her resistant, found her refusing, found her unwilling to become part of what she sought to maintain as separate. The blade entered, not easily, not cleanly, with resistance that was not physical. That was the opposition of intention to intention, of will to will, of the root's ancient and patient persistence against Elena's desperate and immediate need. The cut was not in matter. It was in meaning, in function, in the specific and limited connection that allowed the root to maintain the membrane, to resist the hollow ones, to perform the guardianship that the bloodline had served for generations beyond counting. The root responded, not with pain, with adjustment, with the recognition that this guardian was not like others, that this bloodline member would not serve, would not maintain, would not continue the function that required continuation. The cut was damage, was wound, was the introduction of discontinuity into a system that had persisted through continuity, through adaptation, through the absorption of all who came to it into its distributed awareness. Elena cut deeper, widened the wound, introduced more discontinuity, more damage, more of the specific and limited and bounded destruction that was her only remaining choice, her only possible action, her only way to refuse all the forms of service that the system demanded. The membrane failed. Not immediately, gradually, from the point of her cut outward, the boundary that separated the protected zone from the hollow one's pressure began to thin, to develop gaps that were not openings but absences, not penetrations, but dissolutions of the distinction between inside and outside, between maintained and threatened, between the specific and limited existence that guardianship protected and the infinite possibility that pressed against it. The hollow ones entered, not as invasion, as return, as the restoration of the state that had preceded the membrane, that had preceded the root, that had preceded the bloodline and its guardianship and all the specific and limited and bounded existence that these had maintained. They did not destroy. They dissolved. They returned what had been differentiated to undifferentiation, what had been complex to simplicity, what had been Elena to the possibility from which she had emerged and to which she now returned. She felt it. The loss of boundary, the loss of self, the loss of the specific and limited and bounded existence that she had fought to maintain through all her choices, all her refusals, all her desperate and ultimately futile resistance to the incorporation and preservation and transformation that the system offered. She was becoming hollow, becoming possible, becoming the raw material from which new differentiation might emerge, new complexity might evolve, new guardianship might develop. But she was not gone, not dissolved, not completely. The knife remained. In the wound she had made, in the root she had damaged, in the system she had breached. And the knife was of the bloodline, was of the same substance, the same intention, the same specific and limited and bounded existence that had created the membrane, that had maintained it, that had resisted the hollow ones through all the generations of guardianship. The knife remembered. Not consciously, functionally. It maintained the pattern of its creation, the intention of its forging, the purpose for which it had been made, to serve the bloodline, to maintain the boundary, to resist dissolution, even at the cost of destruction. And from the knife, from the wound, from the point of Elena's final and desperate act, a new membrane began to form. Not the root's membrane, not the system's membrane. A new membrane formed from the specific and limited and bounded destruction that Elena had introduced, that maintained distinction through opposition, that created boundary through resistance, that required not incorporation or preservation or transformation, but the continuous and endless and active refusal of dissolution. The hollow ones pressed against this new boundary and were resisted, not by the root, not by the system, by the knife, by the wound, by Elena's final act, preserved in the moment of its execution, maintained as permanent and unending resistance that did not require guardian or bloodline or ritual, but only the fact of opposition, the fact of refusal, the fact of specific and limited and bounded existence asserting itself against the infinite. Elena was gone, but her refusal remained. Her resistance remained. The cut she had made in the root, in the system, in the membrane itself, this remained and maintained and guarded, not through presence, but through absence, not through existence, but through the specific and limited and bounded destruction that was her legacy, her inheritance, her final and complete service to the function that had defined her bloodline, her house, her impossible and necessary choice. The root died. The system failed. The bloodline ended. But the boundary remained, maintained by absence, guarded by refusal, preserved in the specific and limited and bounded destruction that was Elena's gift to the world she had left, the protection she had provided through her final act, the eternal and unchanging resistance that required no guardian, no vigilance, no transformation, only the memory of her choice, her refusal, her cut. This is one ending. There are others. Go back, choose again.